He is Harold Reynolds. How are you, HR?
Rich, I'm good, man. How you doing?
I'm doing fine. Better talking to you right now. So let's get into it. I had to look up Luis Rojas. I'm being very honest with you. I'm not very well aware of who quality control coaches are, despite their potential famous family lineage. But I give you the floor on what you think of the Mets hire.
Well, first of all, he's Felipe Alou's son. So the great manager is one of his sons. That's his mother's name. So when Felipe came to America, they grabbed the Alou name. It's actually Felipe Rojas Alou.
Mm-hmm.
And so the young guy stayed with Rojas. But he's worked his way through the minor leagues with the Mets. He knows basically the whole roster. He's managed them, coached them. I've heard nothing but great things about him as far as being a field general and understanding the game of baseball. So they're excited about it. I've been hearing this for about a week. I had to figure out who he was myself, and so that's kind of the background on where he comes from.
So, I mean, there's a media aspect to this too, and I'm hoping he's ready for that also, because this is the deep end of a baseball pool. Manager of the New York Metropolitans, certainly after Carlos Beltran didn't even manage a game. Harold, I mean, is there any sense on how he might handle that?
Yeah, he's very well, very articulate, speaks English quite well. He's obviously fluent in Spanish, but he's handled the media before, and they just feel like the pedigree of growing up in that family around his dad, Felipe, and spending time there. But he's been through a lot. I think the big thing, though, they stayed within the organization, and they felt like they had opportunities to go other ways, and he just was a guy that stood out for a long time. When they went through the process not too long ago to hire Beltran in the first place, he was one of the guys that they had considered. And they were going to try to bring him along a little bit slower in the organization, but obviously once Beltran was not able to handle the reins anymore, they felt like it was just best to go ahead and keep the continuity going, and they felt like this kid was ready.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, there's many.
It's a big step, man. It's a huge step, and especially with the firestorm that he's coming in, and having to deal with New York is a lot different than, say, Seattle. No offense, but I played there long enough.
Of course,
there's a lot more media and a lot more scrutiny in New York, and he's got to answer some tough questions early on, and we'll see how he gets through that phase.
Well, at least he is totally removed from anything that had anything to do with the Astros in 2017 or anything. With any of this. I mean, he just came into the major leagues as the quality control coach just last season. So he's in-house. He's one of their own. And look, I mean, you could look around so many sports where let's go for the guy who is the young guy who's got a lot on the ball, who's sharp, who can communicate with anybody in our locker room or clubhouse when it comes to baseball. And before somebody snaps him up when he's supposedly quote-unquote ready, Let's get him right now. I mean, that might be the scenario that the Mets are thinking of here, HR.
Yeah, the one thing that gives you a little bit of a pause is the Mets are built to win right now. This isn't, let's ride along with our new manager and we'll figure it out in 2 or 3 years. DeGrom's ready. You got to figure out what you're going to do with Syndergaard. This team is built to jump into, and what looks like right now for me, the best division in baseball is the National League East. I mean, it is a beast. So he's got to be ready, and he's got a club that's going to be demanding wins. This is not going to be a rebuild in New York, so it's a different scenario.
So you think the NL East, because Girardi's now with the Phillies. We all know that the defending World Series champions are in that division. You've got the Mets, clearly, and the Braves, and how terrific a season they had until their disaster in the playoffs. I mean, You're right there. I mean, and what do you think the Astros and the Red Sox are going to do with their vacancies?
That is still to be determined. I know the Red Sox. We'll start with the Sox. I don't know where they're going yet. I'm feeling like with Chaim Bloom, the new general manager, he's going to go with somebody he knows, and he's trying to get the guy I've heard from Tampa that was the bench coach, but. I don't know. I think it's going to be somebody he's familiar with. It's a different scenario than it is with Houston, because he's got to build a whole new culture. And you're looking at the Red Sox really starting to turn things over a little bit more sabermetrically with time there. And so I think he's going to look for a more sabermetric-minded manager. And Alex Cora was familiar with the numbers, used them occasionally, but he was more of a gut. He was more old school, and he had a lot more control over that organization. Most managers now, front offices are sending down lineups. They're helping order and direct how games are ran. So I think you're going to see a lot more hands-on in Boston. In Houston, total different scenario. You know, they're in the fire right now.
Oh, yeah.
Because they had their manager and the general manager and all the things the commissioner brought down on them. I think they got to go with an experienced guy. And to me, I think Buck Showalter is a perfect fit. You know, you being from New York, Rich, when George Steinbrenner got suspended from baseball, Buck was the manager. A lot of these different things were happening. Steve Howell got suspended all those times. Buck was the manager. So he's been through the storm. He's built organizations. So I think he's the perfect fit for that organization right now for what they need.
Yeah, because certainly the hire there, more than, obviously we're still waiting to hear from the commissioner. Hal Reynolds here from MLB Network on the Rich Eisen Show. We're still waiting to hear from the commissioner on what the 2018 Red Sox were either up to or not. The hire in Houston is so important. I mean, so important, where we just got to figure we got to get rid of all the trash cans and all the Theraguns and all whatever that might have been going on there in 2017, and whatever the mindset that there's no other way to put it, metastasized in 2017 that other teams might have employed in 2018 or not, that whatever went there needs to be wiped clean, and then come up with a scenario where all the players say something other than what Bregman said about, he kind of pulled a McGuire, I'm not here to talk about the past at FanFest, and Altuve saying I didn't wear any buzzers or anything like that, but everything else I'm not ready to talk about. You've got to come up with a plan in Houston, from the manager to what the players are saying, to get this thing in a different direction, Harold. What do you think?
Totally agree. That, what they did at FanFest is not going to work. And that was ill-advised. I don't know who was advising them at that time, but they got to come clean, or it's going to linger forever on the rest of their resume as a team, everything moving forward. So they got to have that addressed when they get to spring training. But it's a different scenario in Houston in my mind, because you got rid of the general manager and the manager. They don't have a general manager. And so I know the owner and that what they've built there with their new systems of feeling like they were very sabermetric, and their scouting department and player development and everything was very reliant on that. You want to have somebody that doesn't upset that apple cart, because they really do have great players. So that's a whole different thing. And to me, that's why you got to have that guy that sits in front of the media, that manager, after every game, and he's credible. And that's why I think Buck Showalter's the guy.
Harold Reynolds here on the Rich Eisen Show. Okay, you're going to have Jeter and Larry Walker later on today at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time.
Yeah, it's going to be cool, man.
I was talking about
it's going to be a lot of fun.
I was talking about earlier the speeches in the Meadow in Cooperstown this summer. You're going to have somebody like, in a way, corporate America with Jeter, and then you're going to have Larry Walker showing up, and I guess in a SpongeBob shirt, maybe. You got a contrast in this class right here, Harold. That's going to be blessed.
Well, that's what's cool about it. Plus, all of New York's going. It's going to be amazing. It will be the largest crowd in Cooperstown history. I know they had some great crowds at Mariano and with Ripken and Gwen at the same time. But, Derek Jeter is everything from New York and beyond. And Larry Walker's from Canada. And so you're going to have a lot of folks coming down from nearby Canada and Montreal and whatnot to come down as well. So it's going to be an enormous crowd, and it's going to be a fun time.
Do we know who the individual that did not vote for Jeter as a Hall of Famer? Do we know who that person is, Harold?
Haven't heard yet, but I'm sure they are searching for him all over the place, him or her. I just hope that they voted because they just felt like he wasn't qualified to be a Hall of Famer. Okay, that's your opinion. That's what you want to say. But I sure hope it's not a publicity stunt. And it will be fleshed out in due time, and that will be a conversation to be had. But I want to hear from the individual, and I'd love to hear what they were thinking.
Yeah, the only one my prediction is you're going to hear, well, Ripken didn't go in and all these others didn't go in as unanimous at the shortstop position, and I didn't feel that Jeter was better than them, so I couldn't vote for Jeter. And to me, that just makes no sense. I mean, everybody should be in its own world, in its own time, in its own place, judged on whether is the person worthy of the Hall of Fame or not. And I know it took Walker all the way to the very end of his eligibility to finally get that consensus, but somebody like Jeter, there's just, I mean, you can't tell the story of the Yankees, can't tell the story of that part of the century without him. I mean, it's nuts.
I hear you, and we all have a love for Derek and watched him play, really watched him grow up. We spent time together covering him from '96 on,
yep.
And fall in love with that core four and the Yankees. And the biggest thing when you look back at Derek's legacy, he did it through all the controversy. You look at all the players that fell during that time, the steroid era. He stayed clean, and trust me, they were looking. And he stayed clean through the whole thing. I think that is a tribute to him and the player that he is to put up the numbers and all that. So I think that stands for something as well. But you're dead on. You're probably right. If Willie Mays wasn't 100%, how is he? If Cal wasn't 100%, how is he? So you can be absolutely right. But we'll see. I mean, we're going to hear from this individual, and I just wonder what they have to say.
What do you think his legacy is? What's Jeter's legacy?
I think he's one of the greatest players in history, and his impact is going to be everlasting. I mean, it's Mickey Mantle. It's one of the biggest Yankees ever, and I think maybe bigger in this sense that we live in a different time than in the 40s and the 50s with DiMaggio and Mantle and all those guys because of social media and the reach of how you can reach not only New York or baseball fans, but globally. Derek Jeter walks down the street, people know who he is. Mike Trout walks down the street, people do not recognize him as much. And Mickey Mantle, they would have never known had he walked down the street in Oregon when I was growing up as a kid. I never saw him. I just heard about him. I read about him. So that's how things have changed so much. But he transcends the game of baseball. And it was interesting, real quick, I'll just throw this out there.
Sure.
I'm curious what's going to happen on induction day. I mean, this is a guy that I was fortunate to really get to know, and I hosted his events in golf in Tampa for 10 straight years, and we had John Legend sing. We had Boyz II Men at his wedding. He knows Jay-Z. He's been at his events. There's no telling who's going to be there. He's interviewed Obama. He was on Saturday Night Live. I mean, he transcended so many things outside of baseball. This is a very unique baseball player. We may see it in other sports. You don't see that in baseball.
Well, I've already volunteered my services for Induction Day, Harold. Earlier in the show, I said that whoever did not vote for Derek should be found and then forced to present Jeter at the Hall of Fame, reading comments written by me personally. I would write them. What do you think?
Would be... I feel for that person.
Well, that person, the remarks would go something along the lines of, here's Derek Jeter, a baseball Hall of Famer, I suck. That's basically what it would basically read. I might workshop
from
it.
A kid from Staten Island.
That's right.
They would have no chance.
That's right. Ask the poll question of HR before we send him on to, have both Derek Jeter and Larry Walker on MLB Network Studio 42 on MLB Tonight at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. What do you got over there, Chris?
All right, HR, who's most deserving of Hall of Fame enshrinement? Some of the guys who aren't in: Pete Rose, Barry Bonds, and Roger Clemens. None of the above, all of the above.
Ooh. I have a hard time with Pete Rose not being in the Hall of Fame. And I understand. I'll probably get crushed by a lot of people. But 4,256 hits, and I know the gambling thing came as a manager. So as far as I know, he could have been gambling as a player too. But I just think that as time comes, I'm watching the softening stance of Bonds and Clemens with steroids. And I think people are glossing over Pete Rose and that with the world changing the way it is, I think Pete's got to be in the Hall of Fame.
Thanks, Harold. Again, we'll see you on MLB tonight at 5:30 Eastern with both Jeter and Walker. It'll be a fun show. I'll be tuned in. We'll chat soon.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Yeah,
Appreciate
man.
it.
No,
Thanks,
right back
Rich.
there. Thank you. That's Harold Reynolds here on The Rich Eisen Show.
For more of The Rich Eisen Show, tune to Audience Channel 239 on DirecTV for free on BR Live or download the Rich Eisen Show app.